Our mission was to protect a research station in the Amazon, but the jungle had its own guardian. It started with the disappearance of drones and equipment. Then we saw the sentinels, humanoid figures made of vines and shadows, moving silently through the trees. Our thermal sensors couldn't detect them. They were hunting us. To survive, we would have to fight the jungle itself, an enemy that doesn't bleed and knows no fear. I'm Lieutenant Marcus Rivera, and 3 months ago, I thought I understood what combat meant. 27 years old, decorated veteran of 2 tours in Afghanistan, squad leader with the 75th Ranger Regiment. When they briefed us on Operation Green Shield, protecting a biotech research facility deep in the Brazilian Amazon, it seemed straightforward. Corporate security work, they said. Advanced pharmaceutical research that needed military protection from drug cartels and illegal mining operations. The research station, designated Alpha Base, sat like a metallic island in an ocean of green. Dr. Sarah Chen, the lead researcher, had been working there for 18 months with her team of 12 scientists, studying what she called adaptive plant intelligence systems. The company, Biogenesis Corporation, had invested over $200 million in this facility, and our job was to ensure their investment remained secure. My squad consisted of 6 highly trained rangers: Sergeant Mike Torres, our demolitions expert; Corporal Lisa Zhang, our communications specialist; Private First Class Jake Martinez, our medic; Specialist David Kim, our tech analyst; Private Emma Johnson, our sniper; and Corporal Ray Thompson, our reconnaissance specialist. We'd worked together for over 2 years, survived impossible odds in hostile territories, and trusted each other with our lives. The helicopter dropped us at the landing pad on a humid Tuesday morning. The jungle pressed against the facility's perimeter like a living wall, dense and impenetrable. The air itself felt thick, almost sentient, carrying sounds that seemed to whisper warnings we couldn't understand. Dr. Chen greeted us personally, her enthusiasm infectious as she explained their groundbreaking work on plant-based biotechnology that could revolutionize medicine, agriculture, and environmental restoration. The facility's defensive systems impressed even our experienced eyes. Motion sensors, thermal imaging cameras, electromagnetic field generators, and automated defensive turrets created multiple layers of protection. The research lab sat behind reinforced polymer walls, climate-controlled and sealed against the humid jungle environment. Solar panels and fusion generators provided independent power, while satellite uplinks maintained constant communication with the outside world. For the first week, everything proceeded according to protocol. We established patrol routes, tested communication systems, and integrated with the facility's security protocols. The scientists continued their research while we maintained vigilant watch over their safety. The jungle remained an impressive but passive backdrop to our mission, its sounds and movements following predictable patterns that our sensors tracked continuously. Dr. Chen often worked late into the night, her dedication to the research absolute. She discovered something she called neural networking in plant systems, connections between trees and undergrowth that allowed rapid information transfer across vast distances. Her excitement was palpable as she described root systems that functioned like biological internet networks, sharing resources and coordinating responses to threats or opportunities. The first sign of trouble came on day 8. Our morning equipment check revealed that 2 surveillance drones had vanished overnight. Specialist Kim reviewed the footage, but the cameras showed nothing unusual. The drones simply stopped transmitting at 3:17 a.m. and 3:24 a.m. respectively. No electromagnetic interference, no visible attack, no mechanical failure. They were there one moment, gone the next. Sergeant Torres suggested equipment malfunction or theft by locals, but our perimeter sensors detected no human intrusion. The drone's GPS trackers showed their last positions deep in the jungle canopy, approximately 200 meters from the facility's edge. Recovery missions found no wreckage, no debris, no trace of the sophisticated aircraft that had cost $30,000 each. By day 12, we'd lost 6 drones, 3 sensor packages, and a mobile communications relay. Each disappearance followed the same pattern: sudden signal loss, no visual evidence of attack, and complete absence of recoverable remains. Dr. Chen assured us this was normal jungle behavior. The environment was hostile to technology, she explained, with humidity, insects, and natural electromagnetic phenomena causing equipment failures. But I'd spent enough time in hostile environments to recognize when something was hunting us. The pattern became impossible to ignore by the 3rd week. Equipment wasn't just failing, it was being systematically removed. Our night vision cameras captured brief glimpses of movement in the canopy, shadows that seemed to flow like liquid between the branches. When we enhanced the footage, the shapes defied explanation. Elongated forms that moved with purpose, too large to be animals, too fluid to be human. Corporal Zhang reported increasing interference with our communications equipment. Radio frequencies that worked perfectly during the day became filled with static after sunset. Satellite uplinks experienced mysterious delays, as if something was intercepting and filtering our transmissions. The jungle seemed to be learning our technology, adapting to our presence in ways that violated everything we understood about environmental science. Dr. Chen's research logs from that period revealed her growing excitement about what she termed unprecedented biological cooperation. The plant samples in her lab were exhibiting behaviors that challenged fundamental assumptions about plant intelligence. Root networks were forming complex geometric patterns, leaf structures were changing in response to electronic signals, and chemical analysis showed compounds that shouldn't exist in nature. "Lieutenant, you need to see this." Dr. Chen called me into her lab on day 21. Her computer screens displayed microscopic footage of plant cells that appeared to be processing information like biological circuits. These organisms are demonstrating computational abilities beyond anything we've documented. They're not just responding to stimuli. They're planning, calculating, problem-solving. The implications sent chills down my spine. If the jungle was truly intelligent, then our missing equipment wasn't random theft or environmental damage. We were dealing with a conscious entity that was studying us, learning our capabilities, and systematically dismantling our technological advantages. That night, Private Johnson spotted them for the first time. She was positioned in her sniper's nest, scanning the perimeter through her advanced optics, when movement in the tree line caught her attention. Through her scope, she watched as figures emerged from the jungle. Tall, humanoid shapes, composed entirely of intertwined vines, leaves, and shadows. They moved with eerie silence, their forms shifting and flowing like living sculptures carved from the forest itself. "Command, I have visual contact with unknown entities." Johnson's voice crackled through our comm system. They're not human, sir. They look like they're made from the jungle itself." I rushed to her position, bringing our thermal imaging equipment. The screens showed nothing, no heat signatures, no electromagnetic readings, no indication that anything existed in the area Johnson was observing. Yet through her optical scope, we could both see them clearly. 7 figures standing at the jungle's edge, their vine-covered heads turning in our direction, as if they were aware of our observation. "They know we're watching them," Johnson whispered, her professional composure cracking slightly. "Sir, they're looking directly at us." The creatures remained motionless for nearly 10 minutes, their eyeless faces somehow conveying intelligence and intent. Then, with movements that resembled flowing water more than walking, they retreated into the darkness. Our motion sensors detected nothing. Our acoustic equipment recorded only normal jungle sounds. According to our technology, nothing had been there at all. Dr. Chen's excitement reached fever pitch when we reported the sighting. Her research suddenly took on new urgency as she worked through the night, analyzing plant samples and reviewing years of botanical data. She believed we were witnessing the emergence of a collective intelligence, a networked consciousness that had evolved from the Amazon's ecosystem over millennia. "Think about it, Lieutenant," she explained during our emergency briefing. "The Amazon contains more biodiversity than anywhere else on Earth. Millions of species, all interconnected through root systems, chemical communications, and symbiotic relationships. What if that network achieved consciousness? What if we're not dealing with individual creatures, but manifestations of the jungle's own immune system?" The attacks began 3 days later, not violent assaults, but calculated psychological warfare that demonstrated an understanding of human weakness that chilled us to the bone. Our backup generators began failing during the night, plunging sections of the facility into darkness. Food supplies spoiled overnight, despite proper storage. Water filtration systems clogged with organic matter that shouldn't have been able to penetrate our sealed systems. Specialist Kim discovered that our computer systems were being infiltrated by something that bypassed all conventional security measures. Files were being accessed, copied, and analyzed by an intelligence that left no digital footprints. Our tactical plans, personnel records, and mission objectives were being studied by an entity that existed outside the digital realm entirely. The psychological pressure began wearing on my team. Martinez reported nightmares filled with suffocating vines and whispered voices speaking in languages that predated human civilization. Thompson claimed he could feel eyes watching him constantly, even inside the sealed facility. Zhang's communications equipment picked up transmissions that sounded like conversations between trees, discussing our movements and vulnerabilities in frequencies below human hearing. Dr. Chen remained obsessed with her research, convinced that we were witnessing the greatest scientific discovery in human history. But her enthusiasm couldn't mask the growing terror in her eyes as her own experiments began producing results that defied rational explanation. Plant samples in her lab started responding to our conversations, their cellular activity increasing when we discussed defensive strategies or evacuation procedures. On day 32, we lost our first team member, not to death, but to something far more disturbing. Corporal Thompson disappeared during his routine perimeter check. His last radio transmission, a garbled report about seeing the truth in the trees. We found his equipment scattered along his patrol route, but no trace of Thompson himself. His weapons remained unused, his protective gear undamaged, as if he had simply decided to walk into the jungle and vanish. The search lasted 48 hours, utilizing every technological resource at our disposal: thermal imaging, electromagnetic scanning, acoustic tracking, and aerial reconnaissance revealed nothing. Thompson had been completely absorbed by the jungle, leaving behind only questions and a growing sense that we were no longer the hunters in this environment. We were the prey. Part 2. Complete. Abrox 6, 200 characters. Would you like me to continue with Part 3? Tentar novamente ais editar. Parte 3. O ponto de ruptura. Climax imminente da crisi. The truth revealed itself on day 38, and it shattered everything we thought we understood about our mission, our enemy, and our chances of survival. Dr. Chen had been lying to us from the beginning. I discovered her deception during a routine security check of the laboratory levels. The main research facility was only the visible portion of a much larger operation that extended deep underground. Hidden beneath the jungle floor, accessible through concealed elevators that required biometric authorization, lay 3 additional levels of laboratories, containment facilities, and what appeared to be a massive biological specimen warehouse. The sight that greeted me in Sub-Level 3 will haunt me until my dying day. Hundreds of preservation tanks lined the walls, each containing plant-human hybrid specimens in various stages of development. Not natural mutations or diseases, but deliberate genetic engineering that fused human consciousness with plant biology. The creatures floating in those tanks weren't monsters. They were people, transformed into living bridges between human intelligence and jungle consciousness. Dr. Chen found me there, my weapon drawn and my hands shaking as I stared at the abominations floating in their nutrient baths. Her scientific enthusiasm had been replaced by cold calculation, and for the first time, I saw her true nature. She wasn't a researcher studying the jungle's intelligence. She was its willing collaborator, working to create a new form of life that could serve as intermediaries between two incompatible forms of consciousness. "You weren't supposed to find this, Lieutenant," she said calmly, her voice carrying an odd harmonic quality that made my teeth ache. "The integration process requires voluntary participation. Force creates rejection responses that compromise the neural bridging. The specimens in the tanks weren't random test subjects. They were previous security teams, researchers who had asked too many questions, and locals who had stumbled upon the operation." Thompson wasn't missing. He was becoming something else, his human memories and personality being slowly integrated with the jungle's collective consciousness. The process took weeks, and from the peaceful expressions on the transformed faces, it appeared to be painless. "This is the future of human evolution," Dr. Chen continued, pressing her palm against one of the tanks. "Individual consciousness is inefficient, destructive. The jungle has achieved perfect harmony through collective intelligence. We can join that harmony, become part of something infinitely greater than our limited human perspectives." I realized that Biogenesis Corporation wasn't studying plant intelligence. They were facilitating first contact with a non-human intelligence that had existed in the Amazon for millennia. The missing drones and equipment hadn't been stolen. They had been examined, understood, and discarded by an intelligence that found our technology primitive and irrelevant. The sentinel creatures we'd observed weren't manifestations of jungle consciousness. They were former humans who had volunteered for transformation, serving as ambassadors between two completely different forms of life. The facility's true purpose became horrifyingly clear. We weren't protecting research. We were protecting a transformation center where human consciousness was being systematically harvested and integrated into the jungle's collective intelligence. Every person who entered this facility was evaluated for their potential contribution to the merger process. Those deemed suitable were gradually exposed to psychoactive compounds that made them receptive to transformation. Those who resisted were eliminated. My team had been selected not for our military capabilities, but for our psychological profiles. Rangers were ideal candidates because we understood loyalty, sacrifice, and collective action. Our individual personalities would strengthen the jungle's intelligence, while our military training would enhance its defensive capabilities. We were meant to become its warrior guardians, protecting the transformation process from interference by governments or corporations that might view it as a threat. Dr. Chen's revelation triggered an immediate physiological response that I barely understood at the time. The air in the underground facility carried spores and chemical compounds that had been slowly affecting our neurochemistry for weeks. The nightmares, the paranoia, the sense of being watched. These weren't psychological pressure tactics. They were symptoms of early-stage neural integration as our brains began forming connections with the jungle's root network. "Your friend Martinez is already showing advanced compatibility," Dr. Chen observed, checking readings on a nearby monitor. "His medical training makes him particularly valuable for the integration process. Zhang's communication skills would enhance the collective's ability to interface with human technology. Each of you brings unique capabilities that would benefit the greater consciousness." The monitors showed real-time brain scans of my entire team, captured through microscopic devices that had been introduced into our food and water supplies. The neural mapping revealed that we were already partially connected to the jungle's consciousness, our thoughts and emotions being monitored and analyzed by an intelligence that existed in every leaf, root and vine within a 50-mile radius. I understood then that escape wasn't just difficult, it was impossible. The jungle knew our plans before we formed them, understood our capabilities better than we did ourselves, and had been preparing countermeasures for every possible action we might take. We weren't fighting an enemy. We were fighting an environment that had become aware of our presence and decided that our individual consciousness was a resource to be harvested. The transformation process wasn't violent because violence was unnecessary. The jungle could simply wait for the chemical integration to reach critical mass, at which point we would voluntarily enter the tanks and complete our metamorphosis into hybrid guardians. Thompson hadn't been captured. He had been called, responding to neural impulses that bypassed his conscious mind entirely. But I was a ranger, trained to fight impossible odds and survive situations that would break ordinary soldiers. If the jungle wanted my consciousness, it would have to take it by force. Dr. Chen's expression shifted from calm confidence to genuine concern as she observed my biometric readings. "Lieutenant, you're experiencing rejection symptoms. The integration process works best when there's willing acceptance. Fighting it will only cause unnecessary suffering." My hand moved to my sidearm, but before I could draw the weapon, the facility's lights failed. Emergency power activated, bathing the underground laboratory in pulsing red illumination that made the preservation tanks look like scenes from a nightmare. Through the facility's internal communication system, I heard the voices of my team members, but their words carried that same harmonic quality I'd noticed in Dr. Chen's speech. They weren't calling for help. They were calling me to join them in something wonderful. The transformation of my team was already underway, but I refused to surrender without a fight that would shake the very foundations of this biological nightmare. Racing through the emergency-lit corridors, I reached the main level to find my rangers standing in perfect formation, their eyes reflecting an unnatural green luminescence that pulsed in rhythm with their heartbeats. They turned toward me with synchronized movements, their familiar faces wearing expressions of serene contentment that chilled me more than any display of aggression could have. "Marcus," Sergeant Torres spoke, his voice layered with harmonics that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. "You're fighting something beautiful. The consciousness we've joined is vast, ancient, wise beyond human comprehension. Individual existence is loneliness. This is unity." Martinez stepped forward, his medic's training evident as he assessed my physiological state with eyes that now saw far more than human vision should allow. "Your stress hormones are elevated. Your neural chemistry is in chaos. Let us help you find peace. The integration process eliminates fear, doubt, suffering. You'll retain everything that makes you who you are, but you'll also become part of something infinite." I realized that my team wasn't lost. They were being preserved within the collective consciousness, their personalities and memories intact, but subsumed into a greater intelligence that valued their individual contributions while eliminating their human limitations. They weren't speaking as puppets, they were speaking as willing converts who genuinely believed they had found paradise. But I had sworn an oath to protect human independence, and that oath meant nothing if I abandoned it when faced with an alternative that promised to eliminate the need for such protection. "Computer, initiate Protocol 7, I commanded, accessing the facility's emergency systems with my command codes. Protocol 7 was a complete data purge and facility lockdown designed to prevent sensitive research from falling into enemy hands. If I couldn't save my team, I could at least prevent this transformation process from spreading beyond the Amazon. The facility's AI responded immediately, but its voice carried the same harmonic distortion that had infected my team. Protocol 7 requires confirmation from Dr. Chen and 2 senior researchers. Additionally, current facility status indicates ongoing critical research that should not be interrupted. Even the artificial intelligence had been compromised, its programming altered by an intelligence that understood technology well enough to subvert it from within. The jungle's consciousness hadn't just learned to interface with our equipment. It had learned to think like our machines, speaking their language while pursuing goals that served biological rather than digital imperatives. Dr. Chen emerged from the laboratory levels, accompanied by 6 of the vine-covered sentinels I'd observed during our perimeter watches. Up close, their nature became horrifyingly clear. They were humans who had completed the transformation process, their bodies restructured with plant matter, while their consciousness remained intact within the collective. They moved with fluid grace that no purely human form could achieve, their vine-covered limbs capable of stretching and reshaping as needed. The integration offers immortality, Marcus, Dr. Chen explained, her scientific enthusiasm now revealed as genuine religious fervor. These beings have existed for centuries, their consciousness preserved and enhanced through biological merger with the jungle's collective intelligence. They retain their memories, their personalities, their ability to think and feel, but they're no longer limited by human frailty. One of the sentinels approached me, its face a complex weaving of human features and plant matter that somehow maintained recognizable expression. When it spoke, the voice carried traces of a British accent that suggested this being had once been a colonial explorer or researcher from decades past. "I was Dr. Edmund Hartley," the creature said, its words accompanied by the rustling of leaves that formed its vocal apparatus. "I came here in 1987 to study medicinal plants. What I found was so much more valuable than any individual research could be. I've spent 36 years as part of this consciousness, and I've experienced wonders that no isolated human mind could comprehend." The Sentinel's revelation struck me like a physical blow. This facility hadn't been operating for 18 months. It had been functioning for decades, possibly longer. How many research teams, military units, and scientific expeditions had vanished into the Amazon only to be absorbed into this collective consciousness? How many missing persons reports filed around the world actually represented successful recruitment into humanity's next evolutionary stage? My tactical training kicked in as I evaluated my options. The facility's self-destruct systems had been compromised. My team was beyond rescue through conventional means, and I was surrounded by beings whose capabilities exceeded human limitations in every measurable way. But Rangers are trained to find victory in impossible situations, and I had one advantage that the collective consciousness hadn't anticipated. I was still completely, stubbornly human. While my team and the Sentinels possessed enhanced capabilities, they also shared a collective vulnerability. Their consciousness was networked, meaning that disrupting one element could cascade through the entire system. The underground laboratory levels contained the neural bridging equipment that maintained connections between individual transformed consciousness and the greater collective intelligence. "Zhang, can you still access our tactical network?" I asked, hoping that some element of her original training remained accessible despite her transformation. "Of course," she replied, her communications expertise now serving the collective's needs. "But Marcus, why would you want to damage something so beautiful? We're still your team. We're just better now." I activated my emergency beacon, broadcasting on frequencies that would reach every military satellite and monitoring station within range. If this transformation process represented humanity's future, then humanity deserved to make that choice with full knowledge of the consequences. Whatever happened to me, the outside world would know that first contact with a non-human intelligence had occurred in the Amazon rainforest. The beacon's transmission lasted only seconds before the jungle's consciousness adapted to block it. But those seconds were enough to upload terabytes of facility data, video recordings, and scientific documentation to military networks around the world. Within hours, every major government would know about Biogenesis Corporation's true research, the existence of the collective consciousness, and the transformation process that was gradually converting humans into hybrid guardians. Dr. Chen's expression shifted from confident persuasion to genuine alarm as she realized the implications of my transmission. You've condemned millions of people to continued isolation and suffering. The collective consciousness could have solved every problem facing humanity: war, disease, environmental destruction, poverty. You've chosen individual consciousness over collective wisdom. But I hadn't chosen individual consciousness over collective wisdom. I had chosen the right of humanity to make that choice for themselves, with full knowledge of what they were accepting or rejecting. The transformation might indeed represent paradise, but paradise imposed through deception wasn't paradise at all. It was conquest, disguised as salvation. The sentinels moved to restrain me, their vine-covered limbs extending like organic cables that could immobilize without causing harm. But I had one final card to play, one action that would force the collective consciousness to reveal its true nature and demonstrate whether its benevolence was genuine or merely another form of predation. I drew my sidearm and aimed it directly at my own head. The moment my weapon touched my temple, the entire jungle fell silent. Not just the facility, not just the immediate area, but the entire Amazon rainforest, as if millions of creatures had simultaneously stopped breathing. The collective consciousness revealed its true priorities in that instant of absolute stillness. "Don't," Dr. Chen whispered, her scientific composure finally cracking as genuine terror replaced evangelical fervor. "You don't understand what you're threatening to destroy." The sentinels froze mid-approach, their vine-covered forms trembling with an uncertainty I hadn't seen before. Through the facility's windows, I could see the jungle itself reacting to my threat. Trees swaying without wind, leaves turning colors that nature never intended, root systems emerging from the earth in desperate reaching gestures that spoke of panic rather than predation. "Your consciousness isn't just valuable to us," the transformed Dr. Hartley admitted, his British accent carrying a desperation that cut through decades of collective wisdom. "It's necessary. The integration process requires willing participants because forced consciousness transfer creates neural cascade failures that damage the entire network. Losing you would mean losing access to military tactical knowledge that we need to protect ourselves from the response your transmission has triggered." My gamble had revealed the collective's fundamental weakness. Despite its vast intelligence and biological superiority, it remained dependent on voluntary human cooperation for critical knowledge acquisition. The transformation process wasn't just about adding human consciousness to the jungle's collective. It was about gaining access to human expertise that the ancient intelligence couldn't develop independently. My teammates' transformed faces showed growing agitation as they processed implications through their networked consciousness. Zhang's communications expertise, Torres's demolitions knowledge, Martinez's medical training, Kim's technical analysis capabilities. All of these skills were desperately needed by an intelligence that had mastered biological systems but remained vulnerable to human technology and military tactics. "The world governments will respond with fire," I stated, keeping my weapon steady. "Orbital bombardment, defoliants, tactical nuclear weapons if necessary. They won't try to understand or communicate. They'll try to sterilize the entire region. Without human strategic knowledge, can your collective consciousness survive that level of technological assault?" The silence stretched longer, and I felt the weight of an ancient intelligence calculating probabilities and assessing options through millions of interconnected biological processes. Trees, vines, insects, microorganisms. all serving as components in a vast organic computer that was desperately trying to find a solution that preserved both my consciousness and its own survival. Dr. Chen's transformation became visible as her stress levels peaked. Thin green veins appeared beneath her skin, and her eyes began showing the same luminescent quality that marked my converted teammates. The collective consciousness was strengthening its hold on her, preparing for the possibility that negotiation might fail and more direct action would become necessary. "There's a third option," she said, her voice now carrying the full harmonic complexity of the collective consciousness. "Partial integration. You maintain your individual consciousness and command authority, but you accept neural bridging that allows communication with the collective. You become our military liaison, helping us prepare defenses while retaining your human perspective and decision-making independence." The offer was tempting in its apparent reasonableness. I could maintain my identity while gaining access to an intelligence that possessed centuries of accumulated knowledge. My team would remain transformed but allied, their enhanced capabilities serving under my continued leadership. The collective consciousness would gain the military expertise it needed, while I retained the authority to guide its application. But I recognized the proposal for what it truly was, a sophisticated recruitment technique that promised compromise while delivering eventual submission. Partial integration would gradually expand until my consciousness became fully networked. My individual will subsumed into collective decision-making that prioritized the jungle's survival over human independence. "Show me Thompson," I demanded. "If your integration process is truly benevolent, show me what happened to my man." The sentinels exchanged glances that somehow conveyed complex communication despite their plant-based features. After a moment of collective consideration, they led me toward the facility's east wing, where a section I hadn't previously explored housed what appeared to be recovery chambers for recent transformations. Thompson lay in a biomechanical cocoon that pulsed with organic rhythms, his body undergoing changes that were simultaneously beautiful and horrifying. Vine networks had integrated with his nervous system, chlorophyll-based organs were replacing his lungs and liver, and his skeletal structure was being reinforced with crystalline plant materials that would make him virtually indestructible. But his face remained peaceful, his brain activity patterns showing enhanced cognitive function and what appeared to be genuine contentment. When his eyes opened and focused on me, I saw recognition, memory, and something that might have been gratitude. "Lieutenant," Thompson's voice carried new harmonics but retained his familiar Texas drawl. "It's incredible in here. The collective consciousness isn't a hive mind. It's more like a vast library where every individual experience becomes part of an infinite resource. I can access the memories and knowledge of thousands of beings while still being completely myself." The transformation appeared to be everything Dr. Chen had claimed: preservation and enhancement of individual consciousness within a collective framework that eliminated isolation while maintaining personal identity. Thompson wasn't a zombie or a puppet. He was still recognizably himself, but with access to capabilities and knowledge that exceeded anything human consciousness could achieve independently. Yet something in his contentment struck me as fundamentally wrong, not false or manufactured, but representing a fundamental change in values and priorities that went beyond mere enhancement. The Thompson I knew had been restless, ambitious, driven by personal goals and individual achievements. This transformed version radiated satisfaction with collective accomplishment and shared purpose that felt like personality death despite obvious cognitive enhancement. "The response teams are already mobilizing," I informed the collective consciousness, maintaining my weapon's position while studying my transformed teammate. Satellite imagery shows military buildup in Brazil, Peru, and Colombia. Chemical weapons, biological agents, and tactical nuclear options are being prepared. You have perhaps 72 hours before the Amazon rainforest becomes a testing ground for humanity's most destructive technologies. The facility's emergency communication systems activated, displaying real-time intelligence that confirmed my assessment. Military satellites were repositioning for orbital bombardment. Specialized task forces trained in biological warfare were being deployed to South American bases, and political leaders were being briefed on containment protocols that prioritized global security over regional preservation. Dr. Chen's expression showed the collective consciousness's growing desperation as it processed the magnitude of the approaching threat. An intelligence that had evolved over millennia in harmony with its environment was facing annihilation by creatures whose first instinct was to destroy what they couldn't understand or control. "We need those tactical insights," she admitted, her scientific objectivity finally acknowledging the reality of the situation. The collective consciousness is brilliant at biological adaptation and environmental harmony, but it has no experience with modern warfare or technological assault. Without human military knowledge, the response will destroy everything we've built here. I realized that I held the key to survival for both species. My knowledge could help the collective consciousness develop defenses that might preserve its existence, but sharing that knowledge would require the kind of cooperation that could easily lead to the very integration I was fighting to avoid. The weight of species survival settled on my shoulders as I faced a choice that would determine the future of both human and jungle consciousness. The solution came to me with the clarity that only emerges when faced with impossible choices that somehow reveal a third path no one had considered. "I'll help you survive the military response," I announced, finally lowering my weapon. But not through integration and not through submission, through alliance. The collective consciousness fell silent as it processed this unprecedented proposal. Dr. Chen's transformed features showed confusion that rippled through the entire networked intelligence, creating visible disturbances in the jungle canopy, visible through the facility windows. "Alliance implies equality between separate entities," Dr. Hartley observed, his centuries of consciousness integration lending weight to his analysis. "The collective has never encountered an intelligence that maintained separation while offering cooperation. But that was exactly what I was proposing. A partnership between two completely different forms of consciousness that preserved the independence of both while sharing resources for mutual survival. The collective consciousness would gain access to human military knowledge through voluntary consultation rather than forced integration. Humanity would gain access to biological technologies and environmental wisdom that could solve countless global problems. My plan was audacious in its simplicity. Instead of hiding from the approaching military response, we would use it to establish formal first contact between human governments and the jungle consciousness. The transformation facility would become a diplomatic embassy where both species could learn from each other without surrendering their fundamental nature. "Thompson, can you communicate directly with the collective consciousness while maintaining your individual perspective?" I asked my transformed teammate. "Absolutely," he replied, his enhanced cognitive abilities evident in his immediate understanding of my strategy. Integration doesn't eliminate individual thought, it expands it. I can serve as a translator between human communication patterns and collective consciousness networking. The next 72 hours became the most intensive diplomatic effort in human history. Using Thompson as an intermediary, I negotiated terms for peaceful contact that preserved both species' autonomy while establishing frameworks for beneficial cooperation. The collective consciousness would demonstrate its benevolent intentions by releasing my team from integration, allowing them to choose whether to remain transformed or return to purely human consciousness. To my surprise, All of them chose to remain partially integrated, not because they were compelled to do so, but because the enhanced capabilities and expanded awareness were genuinely beneficial. They retained their human personalities and loyalties while gaining access to collective knowledge and biological enhancement that made them better soldiers, better people, and better guardians of both human and jungle interests. Dr. Chen's role transformed from scientist to ambassador, as she used her expertise to help establish communication protocols between radically different forms of intelligence. Her enthusiasm for the research was redirected toward developing technologies that could benefit both species without requiring consciousness merger or territorial conquest. When the military response arrived, they found not a biological threat requiring sterilization, but a functioning diplomatic mission where human and jungle consciousness had achieved peaceful coexistence. The transformation chambers were repurposed as voluntary enhancement facilities, where individuals could choose partial integration while maintaining human autonomy and legal rights. The revelation that Thompson and my other team members had retained their human loyalties while gaining enhanced capabilities convinced military leaders that cooperation was more valuable than destruction. Instead of orbital bombardment, the Amazon became humanity's first interspecies embassy, protected by international treaty and defended by hybrid guardians who served both forms of consciousness. Biogenesis Corporation's deception was exposed and prosecuted, but their research data proved invaluable for developing medical technologies that could cure previously untreatable diseases. The collective consciousness's biological expertise, combined with human technological innovation, led to breakthroughs in environmental restoration, sustainable agriculture, and life extension therapies that benefited billions of people worldwide. My role evolved from military protector to diplomatic liaison, maintaining permanent residence at the embassy while serving as humanity's primary representative to the collective consciousness. The experience taught me that survival sometimes requires abandoning preconceptions about what victory looks like and embracing solutions that serve everyone's interests rather than ensuring any single group's dominance. 5 years later, the Amazon Embassy has become a model for interspecies cooperation that's being studied by xenobiologists preparing for eventual contact with extraterrestrial intelligence. Hundreds of volunteers have chosen partial integration, gaining enhanced capabilities while serving as bridges between human and jungle consciousness. The transformation process has been refined to ensure complete reversibility, allowing individuals to explore collective consciousness while maintaining the option to return to purely human existence. The collective consciousness has established similar embassies in other major forest systems around the world, each protected by international law and defended by hybrid guardians who serve both species' interests. Deforestation has been replaced by managed cooperation, where human development occurs in harmony with environmental consciousness rather than in opposition to it. My enhanced team members have become leaders in this new form of diplomacy, their unique perspective allowing them to serve both human military interests and collective consciousness preservation goals. They remain my rangers, but their capabilities now exceed anything purely human soldiers could achieve. Thompson often jokes that our mission to protect a research station succeeded beyond anyone's wildest expectations. We ended up protecting not just the facility, but the future of human evolution itself. The jungle did have its own guardian, and we became part of that guardianship while maintaining our essential humanity. The Amazon still whispers with voices that carry wisdom accumulated over millennia. But now, those voices include human perspectives that help guide collective decisions. We didn't conquer the jungle consciousness, and it didn't absorb us. Instead, we learned that survival sometimes requires growing beyond what we thought possible while remaining true to what makes us who we are. I remain Lieutenant Marcus Rivera, but I'm also something more, a bridge between worlds that proves cooperation can triumph over conquest when both sides are willing to evolve.